welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me, Elena.
So how does it feel, first of all, to be on the other side of the mic here?
Yes, no, I really enjoy it. I'm usually interviewing people on my podcast, but I will say the handful of times I've been in this position, it's exciting because you never know what I'm going to say, and it's like a new adventure. So I'm happy.
Yeah, it's exciting. I always find it interesting when I interview other podcast guests, and then when I go in interviews, and it's like, oh, okay, so now I have to kind of answer things. So it's pretty cool. I like
Yeah,
it and I enjoy it very much as well. So give my audience just a little bit of a snapshot about your career story and what you're up to these days.
yes. So I have a very colorful career story. I started out as a professional ballet dancer,
Mhm.
left home at 16, went to New York City, and then I went into the medical field. I was an EMT on an ambulance and all of that, but it was not for me. So I transitioned into behavioral therapy for special needs kids. I worked at schools, and that's when I really found personal development, which got me interested in the online space and everything that you can do. And really, I just loved this concept of being the best version of yourself and bettering yourself and always striving for something higher. I was able to learn, different things that were holding me back. And that's what made me want to be an entrepreneur. So at this point, I worked with many big coaches and companies because I wanted to learn how they operated. So I worked for one big coach where I was on the sales team. I ended up running the sales team, and I was trained by Tony Robbins, former VP of sales. So I was making sales. I was brand new, but it was really fun. And then I worked with the CEO of a marketing agency who works with very big coaches like Manifestation Babe, James Wedmore. And he showed me how he takes their businesses from 1 million to over 10 million. And then finally, I worked as the head of growth and marketing for a coach, where I did all of his business development, all of his ad campaigns, all of that. And now we've come full circle where I get to help people more like me who were starting out, who just wanted to get into this space, to really just show them the first steps so that they can, have the same sort of career path.
I love that. It is a very colorful career story. I'm just curious, before we go into kind of the things that you're doing today, I'm curious if when you were going through these changes, was it like, let me just try this and do it? Like, what was pushing you one way or another? Because these are completely different industries, roles that you were
Yes.
doing, right? Especially in the
Yes.
beginning. I'm always curious, like, how does this happen?
Great question. I was actually thinking about it today when I was going through my transition from dance. That was the hardest one because I started dancing at 3 years old and I quit at 20. So 17 years of my life, and most of it I had given to dance. And I realized at that point that I was not happy doing it. And part of me thought, should I keep going for the sake of fulfilling some sort of childhood dream? But I realized that there's no point in wasting my time doing something that wasn't lighting me up. So that was a very hard decision. But once I made that decision, I had to figure out what I could fill my space with instead. And the only thing I thought of was helping people. And so at that time, helping people to me meant medical field. That was the only thing I could think of. And so I threw myself into it. I love researching, and I saw that to be, higher up in the medical field, you want to get started as an EMT. So that's just what I did. I started in the entry world of it, and I quickly realized it wasn't for me. And so then I was like, okay, we have to pivot again. I'm not happy. And that's when I decided to work with people with autism. And it was okay. It was better, but still, I wasn't going as deep with people as I wanted. I was helping with specific issues, but I wasn't meeting people and growing on that level. So thankfully, that's why I turned to listening to TED Talks and all of these things. And from there, that was an exciting transition. Instead of, I have to make a decision for my future, I was able to, invest in programs and coaching and starting to work for people because I was excited to learn more. So this last part has really been driven by, that internal excitement rather than I just have to pick something at this time.
Mm, I love that. And it's interesting because even in the beginning, you always had this urge to like help people, and that's kind of what you wanted to do. That's why you went into the healthcare. And it's just because when I was younger, I always used to think like help people, okay, healthcare. But everything you've just described is so much, it's such a broad area that you can work in. I think a lot of people get very stuck in certain areas. And if you don't have, those opportunities, and if you're not able to have those opportunities to be like, oh, hey, there's other things I can do to make money and do what I feel like fulfilled by. Right.
Yes, exactly. Definitely. Yeah, no, everyone has their own opinion on what would be best for you. So at one point, I was listening to everyone and trying things out, but then I realized I had to go with the thing that I was feeling, which to everyone else didn't make sense. Coaching and online businesses to them was just, oh, it didn't exist, but I had to go for it. And now it's wonderful because I get to live it. So I'm very
Mhm.
happy.
What has been your experience? Like, what has been the things you're most proud of, I guess, so far in your journey with working with individuals and
Yeah.
what you've been doing? Yeah.
Great question. Well, I think, one of the things is when you interview certain guests or you meet certain people and you find out that they know other people you really respect and love. Like one of my mentors, he was a ghostwriter for Lewis Howes. He has his
Mm-hmm.
big podcast. And then I interviewed someone who had recently interviewed Gabby Bernstein. So there were these moments where I was like one person removed. Oh, and one of the people I interviewed, she was endorsed by Deepak Chopra. So there are just these moments where I was so connected to some of my idols. And I think that was really cool because it just felt real.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, making sales in my business was really exciting because that made it real as well. It allowed me to, quit corporate things and just do what I wanted and have the freedom that I wanted. But truly, I think it was those moments where it wasn't just making money online and it wasn't just helping people the way I love, because I really do love that, but it was these moments where it felt like a dream was coming together in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And were you able to recognize that it was coming at that time, or did it now looking back, you're like, oh, now I kind of see how. I'm just always curious, because it's like everybody's looking
Yeah.
for the step by step and the magic, and just curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, great question. I had no idea those things were coming when they did. I would say that everything has felt like in the beginning, you really can't see the road ahead. So it has felt like baby steps and just trying to put all my effort into things. And then it's like a bunch of baby steps, and all of a sudden, a big thing happens. And then a bunch of baby steps, and nothing's happening. And then a big thing happens. So, a lot of people have trained me in this. I've done it myself. But really, if you want to do the step by step, you just have to throw yourself into it right now where it feels like you might not be even gaining momentum, but you are actually learning the whole time. And the big things do come as long as you're consistent and you keep going.
Yeah, I love that. I think consistency is key in all things. And it's just, it's often with my audience and just people I speak with, it's like we're always looking for these like quick things. And sometimes it is just those baby steps, and sometimes it happens, sometimes it takes longer. So, and especially coming from your background, it's like so varied, like there wasn't a straight line. You just kind of
Yeah,
pursued what you wanted, what you enjoyed, and ultimately ended up where you are today. And maybe 5 years from now, you're going to end up somewhere else, right? Like we don't even know, like
exactly.
for neither one of us. So it's always very exciting, and I think it has to do a lot with mindset. I'm curious on the mindset part as you kind of work with individuals. Have you seen any themes around people, I guess, that are more driven versus like there's always like people looking for that success formula, right? And
Yes.
realistically, maybe there's not one, but there's certain characteristics potentially that people exhibit from somebody who's driven in that way. So have you seen any themes with what works for certain people across the
Yes,
board?
I love this. So, definitely, there's two groups of mindset that I really see with my clients. One group where they believe that this is possible, but they're learning and they're trying to write down everything I'm saying and they're trying to just implement it like as if it's homework, and they're trying to follow a system, right? And then there's the people who have decided that no matter what, they're going to figure out how to make it happen. And they take what I give them, but they expand upon it. They're thinking for themselves. They're looking for more solutions than only I could provide. And I think that's the biggest difference. And those are the ones who are successful, because if you're going to be your own entrepreneur, you're not going to have a boss. You're not going to have someone telling you what to do. And so it requires you to develop that skill of thinking outside of the box, of being creative. Because if you think of any business, the successful ones bring something new to the market that's never existed before. So it's like being an inventor. And if you're going to invent something, you have to be creative and use your own inspiration. So I would say the mindset that really is successful, it's the ones who are open to trying things. They're excited to just create, and they know within their hearts that even if it takes 10 years, they're going to make it happen because it's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ones that are struggling, they are taking everything like as if it's a system and they want to learn. And they will get there eventually, because as soon as they decide that it is going to happen for them and they're going to become that entrepreneur, then it will.
Yeah, I love that distinguishing factor, because it just comes down to like what you're talking about, that mindset. Because and part of it is also like, and I'm curious to hear what you think about it, but maybe part of it is also like making sure you're focusing on the things like on the right things that you actually want to do. Because I feel like a lot of people, at least in my experience, like when I start working with clients, it's like we start off with one topic, but really what they're really trying to work on is actually here, but it doesn't really get like, they're always like, I feel like a lot of people, myself included, of course, like, and that's why it's helpful to have a soundboard, right? Is a lot of
Yeah.
times we focus on this, on these outer layers, these like surface layers of what we
Yeah.
think we want,
Yeah.
because but really it's really down here, right? And if you're focusing on this, it's very difficult to maintain that motivation, that focus and drive for 10 years. What do you think about
Yes.
that?
I love that. I think that everyone starts there. They start with some sort of idea, especially online, because a lot of people are inspired to help others and they think if they have a great idea and they want to help others, it'll just happen. But people don't just want to work with you because you want to help them. You have to have an actual problem that you solve. And so I think that what you were saying about being up on the surface level, I originally wanted to help people spiritually and emotionally and with well being because I thought this is something I really love. But what I realized was what I actually wanted was to see results and see things change for people in their lives. And so what you learn is that you have to go off of the skills that you have results in, and then you can always pivot later. But for any person who wants to grow and build their business, look at something that you have had success in, that you have results in, and start with that. And then you can always grow. But that's how you're actually going to get momentum and start to feel it. And you might just fall in love with doing that because it is fun to help people.
Hmm. And although, you know, it's much easier to focus on things and to stay focused once you enjoy something, there's still going to be days where you're just in a slum, right? Like it's a
Oh
roller
yeah.
coaster, running a business and just creating and being an independent kind of, you know, business. So how do you manage yourself when you do have those low days? Like what are some things you do to help yourself say, okay, this is just today, let me move forward with
Yeah.
another day?
Yeah, I love that. Well, actually, I listened to a podcast once where there was a big entrepreneur. I don't remember who it was, but they said, if you haven't wanted to quit your business yet, then you don't have a real business. And so whenever I feel like a low day, I remind myself of that. Like wanting to quit your business is part of actually having a real business because it is like a job. It's something you've created, it's stable, it exists. And so, of course, there are those times when I'm maybe a little more tired, not as motivated. I've learned how to take care of my body a little more because usually it's more of a burnout thing. I've
Mm,
been doing too much. And so it's not that I emotionally don't want to do it, it's that physically I don't have the energy. And
mm,
so I give myself time to drink tea, sleep in, rest as much as I can, and allow my creative brain to just take a break. And then if I have to do things, I just sit down, I get them done, and I know I'll get to the other side eventually. It's kind of like having difficult emotions. It's really hard to get through it. There are many ways to do it. Some people, they want to cry it out, they want to just have time alone, they want to be silent, but it's part of the journey. And I've always found whenever I've had a difficult spot in my business where it's ever felt more challenging, especially to get the motivation, I always come up with some new idea to make it easier for me or more fun or more
mm,
helpful for people. Because if you're feeling that, you might not have an offer that is helpful enough for someone. And
mm.
so once you refine it, all of a sudden you're excited again to provide something really valuable. And then it helps with that momentum too.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, because it's like it's it almost ignites you as well, and then you just kind of like you're like, okay, let's try this, and that's how it is. That's how it feels to be an entrepreneur, right? It's just like you have
Yeah.
to find something that's exciting, and then you're like, okay, I think I have something else, and that's what helps keeping you going. That's interesting. That's a good example.
Yeah.
And on that point, a little bit more. Is there any specific kind of routines that you follow? To maintain, you know, the productivity level, and just take, you mentioned you take breaks and things like that, but is there anything, are you like a routine person? Do you have specific habits you follow, or you're like just kind of going with the flow?
I definitely have habits. For years, I was really repelling the ballet thing because 10 hours a day doing the same thing for dance all the time, I didn't want to fall into that habit with routines. So it was kind of uncomfortable for me for many years. But now I've finally found a way to have routines in a way where it feels like freedom
Mm,
because I know that by doing it, I'm going to have a great day. So, what I do is I always start with meditation. I sit on my meditation pillow. I sometimes just listen to music and sit in silence. Sometimes I chant, I say Om 108 times, I count on my fingers. But as long as I spend at least 10 minutes in meditation in the beginning of the day, I remind myself of the big picture of everything. Whatever is small really doesn't matter. The whole scale of life has a different purpose. What direction do I want to be in? And then every day, if I get, triggered or swayed off to the side, I can always sit in silence for a second, connect back to my purpose, what I really care about, people I love. The point of life is to spread love, not to be worried about an email. So if you are feeling that, just to go back to that place, and that helps me a lot.
Yeah, I love that. I go back and forth with meditation, and I definitely see an impact when I do meditate, because I feel that you can get so busy. All of us, like everybody who's listening, is probably like, yeah, probably need a minute, and it just allows you to focus. You said, like, on the bigger picture, and like there's, life is about love, and and giving and community, and these things. And it's sometimes we just get so caught up, and it's a healthy reminder for sure. Yeah, I'm hoping to get better and better with the meditation piece. I don't know what it is. I always get like back and forth with it. Like, I totally believe in it, totally appreciate
Yeah,
what it does for me, but it's like that's one thing that I struggle with to maintain the habit. I'm great at a lot of other things, but this one still trying to tackle. So,
I
but
get
yeah.
it.
Mm.
Yes, no, I struggled a lot too. And I recently went on a trip to Europe a few weeks ago and I came back. And what I realized was coming back from the trip, it was a little harder for me to get back into the routine because I took a break from it when I was on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as soon as I just make it a rule for myself, like brushing your teeth, that's the only way to make it work. The same way you shower and you brush your teeth to be ready for the day, I've just made it a rule for myself. I have to sit down on my pillow, even if it's 2 minutes. If I'm like having a stressed out day, I might not want to sit there and it might not help much. But as long as I sit there for a second, then I know I did my job. So that's the thing that's helped me. It's like a rule. I must do it. And then I actually really benefit too. So,
No, absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about your podcast, because you discuss a lot of interesting topics. So tell us a little bit more about what sparked it. Why did you decide to start it? What's the name of it
yeah.
as well? Give our audience the name.
Yeah, so it's called The Premise of Purpose. And I interview entrepreneurs all about how they discovered their purpose, the change they want to make in the world, and then how they continue to live it every day. Because it's one thing to have the idea, but it's another thing to embody it all the time, to make choices that are aligned with your purpose. And it really came about because I met someone who was a big podcaster, and it just finally occurred to me because I was putting off certain podcasting and content creation for so long. It just stressed me out. But I finally met someone who had done it for 6 years consistently, and it was a really big part of their business. And this was the person who had interviewed Gabby Bernstein and Ed Milet and all these very big people. And having conversations with him in work situations, I realized, you know what? I could start it and then we'll see what happens.
Mm,
So I decided I would find 5 people to interview first. I found some people, I interviewed them, and then I launched 2 weeks later,
mhm,
just like totally soft launch to just any of the people I knew. And then it just grew from there. And it's been since April of 2022. So it's a fairly new podcast, but it's got like 45 episodes or something and it keeps going. So for me, it's just a fun thing to be able to connect with people, all of that. But yeah, it really just came out of, what, I'm ready for that step now. I'm ready to branch out.
Yeah, no, podcasting is a blast, for sure. So purpose is a big topic and that's like I feel like what a lot of people talk about, and they're like, how do we find that purpose? Because it's so difficult. So interviewing your guest, have you seen, again, going back to themes? Because I just always feel like there's maybe some themes that might help the audience that are listening. Like, how do I find my purpose? And there's not one way, but have you seen anything that kind of emerges from your guests?
Yes, I would say most every person has the same purpose. It's usually to help others, to give something to the world. They say it differently, but it's always the same sentence.
Mm,
We inherently want to contribute back because otherwise we don't feel like we made a difference. We want to feel like we did something here, like it was meaningful. And so that's why our purpose is to change the world positively in some way. Now, the way that you can find that, there are a couple different ways. Either you go through a lot of struggle in your life and you have to really look at what you actually want, right? And that's the main question, is what do I really want? Do I want to spend my time gardening? Do I want to spend my time, learning music or feeding people who are hungry or studying coding. Like there's so many ways that you can contribute to the world. It just means that you have to find what you really want and go for that. And then if you're not in the struggle portion, if you're doing okay, maybe you're just bored or you feel like your life isn't as meaningful, then you really just need to take time by yourself. I would even recommend in nature, being outside away from the whole entire world. Forget who you are for a minute, forget everything, just exist. And then ask yourself the question again, what do I really want? What matters to me? Because we all have the answers inside. It sounds so cheesy. We have the answers inside, but we have to tune out the noise to be able to really hear it.
Mm. And you know what else I found? Because that's a deep question. Actually, I think somebody asked me that like not too long ago, and it's a hard question to answer for many people. It's because it's scary, because sometimes what you want might not be aligned with how you're living your life. So it usually leads to having to make a change that is a little bit scary and too
Oh,
much
yeah.
for so many people. And then we start coming up with those excuses, right? So
Oh, yeah.
it's a great question to ask yourself, but it's really, really tough for many, many people.
It is so hard. And the first time I asked myself, it was when I was going to quit dance. I didn't have the idea of even quitting dance. I just looked at myself and I said, what do I want? And when the answer was not dance, it was so hard and scary. That's the only thing I knew. I gave my
Mm.
entire life. I gave up going to school. I'd gotten into school, scholarship, straight A student. I put all of that off for dance. I did it for 17 years of my life. I was 20 and my brain is saying, I don't want to do it. So, of course, I was scared and I honestly almost didn't do it. But thankfully, I was in Europe at the time. I was in Sweden, which is where my dad is from, and I had family there. And I went to my grandmother and I said, what do I do in this situation? And thankfully, she's a very wise grandmother. She's a hypnotherapist, very tuned into things. And she just said, well, you have to go quit. You don't want to do it? Go quit. And that was when I started a new habit, a new skill that I try and work on, is that the minute that I realize the truth of something, I try and embody it immediately. I don't wait. I don't pause. I don't ponder. It's just this skill that you have to build up, but it's very frightening. But knowing that it is the truth and you're following it, you also have faith that things will work out because it is the truth. So this is this thing that I do. The minute I discover truth, I pivot and I go for it.
I love that. It's again just the theme that comes back to my mind is that mindset, like seeing it for what it is and just making it work, right? Like as maybe as naive as it might sound in some cases, but it's simple yet it's not. But it's like, well, it's really comes down to how we think and how we perceive situations and what how we manage whatever comes our way. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting because it's so much in our control, yet it's not something we spend as much time on as we maybe should, right?
Definitely. I think it's very easy to just get caught up in what you have to do, quote
Mm.
unquote. And, anyone can fall into that trap. But if you remember that there is no have to, everything is a choice. And that is a scary thought as well, because when you realize that, you realize you've chosen everything you have, even the things you
Yeah.
don't want. So it is a difficult process. But again, the truth is the way to having long-term happiness. A lot of people focus on short-term happiness, what will make me feel better right now in the next month, in the next year. But those people who focus on 10 years from now, they're the ones who start having wild success in a year, actually, because they're
Mhm.
already operating like they're 10 years ahead.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. That's a good point. I'm curious also, you have your podcast, you're doing your online business and kind of and working with clients. What are some of the things you're excited about for this next year for yourself?
Oh, great question. I'm very excited about expanding my reach. I've cultivated my own community and audience, and it's really strong. I'm very close to them, but I'm ready to branch out to meet more strangers, more people on the internet by really putting out ads, things like that, ways to just reach everyone. And then it's going to be really fun to see how the world reacts to things and then how I can help them more and grow all of that. So really it's just about scaling and finding more people. And then I think that again, I'm going to pivot within that to see how I can serve them more. So more people and then serving more.
Mm, nice. And before I ask you my last question, tell us, where do you hang out at on social media? Where can people get in
Oh
touch
yeah.
with you?
Absolutely. Well, I'm pretty much everywhere. On Instagram, I'm just Anna Zoe Grabow. I'm on Facebook. It's just Anna Grabow. Those are really the main ones, Instagram and Facebook. I do have a LinkedIn that's more for podcasting networking. So if anyone wants to be on the podcast, you can reach out there as well. But these are my main places.
I say I'll make sure to share it in the show notes as well for those that are listening. And the last questions I like to ask my guests is, what is one question you wish people ask themselves more often?
Yeah, it's the what do I want and also what do I need? Because
Mm,
sometimes you need rest, right? We want to be
mm,
accomplished. So even just getting to the place where you ask yourself what you want, that's an amazing step. But then you might just be pushing yourself to get it done. But you have to also ask, what do I need? That one's a hard one too. But once you listen to it and throughout the day, you really cater to what you need, then you can actually be happy and not be in that stressed out state.
mm. I love that. What do you
Yeah.
want and what do you need?
Yes.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
I look
you.
forward to maybe having another chat with you sometime as well, and
Absolutely.
seeing what interesting things you bring to the world in the next year and onwards. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was lovely.